Welcome in to Run the League. This is week 2 of the fantasy football season. We're going to be talking about the waiver wire after week 1 action. Let's get this going. Okay, guys, so a lot of action happened in week 1. We have a ton to talk about. Of course, I'm going to give you all kinds of feedback on the waiver wire. I know y'all are trying to figure out, where do you go next? Who do you want to add? And just kind of how can you make your team better following week 1, whether that was winning your first week or losing your first week. So I'm going to go position by position. I'll start with running back, go into wide receiver, quarterbacks, tight ends, talk about some of my favorite additions of the week, and also kind of tell you how much fancy or fab budget I'm willing to spend on each player. Of course, there's fab. There's also waiver wire priority. So 2 different versions. Most of the leagues I'm in use fab, but I'll kind of give some updates on what you should use priority-wise as well. So running back position, I think the first name that we have to talk about is Elijah Mitchell, the running back for the 49ers. This was one of the weirdest circumstances I can ever remember in fantasy football. So, first of all, Raheem Mostert goes 2 for 20. Looks like he's going to run for about 1,000 yards on the Detroit Lions, and he is immediately hurt, which has been the story of Raheem Mostert's career, unfortunately. But the bigger part about this was Trey Sermon was ruled inactive before the game. So, Sermon out, a probably round 7, round 8 pick for most of us. Raheem Mostert down, another round 7, round 8 pick. And the 2 guys left standing are Elijah Mitchell and Jamichael Hastie. And Elijah Mitchell just ran with the job. Had over 100 yards rushing, scored a touchdown, looked solid. But it was just so weird because Sermon, coming in, they spent a 3rd-round draft pick on him. He looked really good in the preseason, was taking all the first-team reps. And then Kyle Shanahan just says, you know what? Hastie and Mitchell have been better throughout preseason, and really it was kind of baffling. I feel like there's more to the situation, and I do think Sermon will be back, which is why we need to spend some time having a conversation about Elijah Mitchell. So for me, if you do not have an investment in the 49ers backfield, meaning you don't have Raheem Mostert and you do not have Trey Sermon, then I would probably only spend maybe 10% of my fab budget. So if you have $100, I'd only spend 10. And the reason for that is because I think there's a high likelihood that Trey Sermon does get into the fold and start making an impact, start kind of mucking up this backfield a little bit and making it really hard to kind of make a determination on who to start each week. But if you have Mostert and or Sermon, especially if you have Sermon at this point, I think you need to probably spend 20% of your budget. And the reason for that is because you made an investment on Sermon. So I'm going to guess that the depth on your roster is kind of down right now. In one of my situations, Sermon's on my team. I also had Mostert. So I'm left kind of trying to make a decision. Okay, do I just hope that Sermon takes over the job, or do I flip over and go with a guy like Elijah Mitchell to be my RB4 on my team? It's a really tough decision, but I think I'm willing to spend up for him. And he's a guy that is a must-add this week for most people. The second running back I have to mention is kind of this is an obvious one, but I just want to make sure he's picked up in most leagues. And there's a couple guys like that. But Tyson Williams, the running back for Baltimore, Jamal Williams, the running back for Detroit, and Nyheim Hines, the running back for the Indianapolis Colts. All 3 need to be rostered everywhere. Some have higher roster percent shares than others, but those 3 guys, must-adds this week. They need to be on a roster. Go pick them up. You'll be happy that you did. The final 2 guys I need to talk about the running back position. Kenny Gainwell, the running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, and Tony Jones Jr., the running back for the New Orleans Saints. Gainwell, 9 for 37 and a score. He also had 3 targets. So he's a guy, he's very interesting. So he's clearly the handcuff in Philadelphia. He will be Miles Sanders' backup for this season. Boston Scott was not involved at all, so therefore Kenny Gainwell is pretty valuable. It seems like he already has a role, and for me, watching football on Sunday, if you start seeing rookies have a role early in the season, that's a great sign going forward, and that's kind of the Elijah Mitchell kind of rationale as well. So yeah, Kenny Gainwell, pick him up. I'd spend less than 10% of my fab on him. So don't go crazy spending. Unless you have Miles Sanders, maybe I'd be willing to add a little bit more to the pot. Tony Jones Jr., he came out, played really well for the Saints, but he's going to be very game script oriented. So they were destroying the Packers. Final score was 38-3. He had 11 carries for 50 yards. I think in most games when it's close, I think those carries will probably be more like 8, which still valuable carries, but he is the clear backup to Alvin Kamara, also a clear handcuff. So he's another guy I would consider adding. If you have Alvin Kamara, definitely add him, just because if something does happen to Kamara, hopefully it doesn't, Tony Jones will be a very priority add that week and will be a guy that you would spend half your budget on. So might as well spend 5% instead of 50% if and when that injury does occur. Moving on to the wide receiver position. The one guy who has to be added, I just go pick him up. You will thank me later. Mike Williams. If Mike Williams is not added in your league, you need to go pick him up. I think he could end up being a top 25 wide receiver before the season's over. I've been a big proponent of Mike Williams ever since he was drafted. I thought he was going to come in, be the guy, be awesome, be a really good player in that offense along with Keenan Allen, and it just hasn't happened. The targets have never been there. When the touchdowns weren't there, he was kind of busting. But after watching week 1, he got 12 targets, the most ever in his entire career. He was 8 for 82 and a touchdown. He was very, very good, heavily targeted. And I think the biggest thing you want to take away from the whole Charger situation is that clearly Justin Herbert wants to throw the ball down the field, which has been a far cry from what they've done in the past. When Anthony Lynn was their head coach, it was a lot of dump-offs to Austin Eckler, a lot of running back involvement in the pass game. I don't know that that's going to be the situation anymore. I'm not going to say Eckler's going to have 0 catches every week like he had in week 1. But what I am saying is I think Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are due for huge target shares. I think Herbert's going to be spreading the ball all over the field. And I'm not convinced that the Chargers' defense is all that great. So therefore, I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Mike Williams, must-own guy. I would spend, I think I'd spend 30% of my budget, especially if you need help at the wide receiver position. A couple more guys at the wide receiver spot. I'm going to start with the 2 who were impacted by injuries this week. So Denver Broncos wide receiver Tim Patrick, he's getting a huge upgrade because Jerry Jeudy is out for 4 to 6 weeks with that high ankle sprain. Might even be longer than that. We've seen how high ankle sprains can linger. Michael Thomas last year is the perfect example of that. And so Jeudy, he's going to be out indefinitely. Tim Patrick is a guy who I think is going to get a lot of targets. He was playing the same amount of snaps as Jerry Jeudy before Jeudy got hurt. Obviously, Jeudy was looking like he was poised for a massive season, looked great in week 1, but Courtland Sutton did not, which means that Tim Patrick could be there and be the wide receiver 1 in Denver, and it would not shock me. Obviously, Noah Fant is probably going to be the top target at the tight end spot, but as a wide receiver goes, I think Patrick could be a very nice add for teams in the future. The other guy impacted by injury is Cedric Wilson, the wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. Michael Gallup out 3 weeks, so therefore Cedric Wilson's going to get probably a pretty good target share. And because of that, I think he's a guy that you kind of want to look at and say, okay, maybe I'll throw, $1 to try to add him, because he could be a guy that gets, 7 targets 1 week. In weeks that CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper maybe both don't go off, maybe Cedric Wilson becomes that wide receiver 2 for a particular week. So yeah, Cedric Wilson, keep an eye on him. And then a couple other guys. So they're both rookies. And I talked about how you like seeing rookies have good involvement week 1. Well, the 2 guys to look at, Terrace Marshall and Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore played 20 snaps. So think about it. He only played 20 snaps the entire game. He was the clear 4th wide receiver on his team in week 1. But the rookie had 4 receptions for 64 yards, and he also had 5 targets. So in the 20 snaps he played, he was targeted on 20% of those snaps. That is insane. I think Rondale Moore is a very interesting add. I know Christian Kirk is also going to be a guy that a lot of people are excited about because of the touchdowns that he scored this past week, and I'm fine with adding him. I think Moore and Kirk are the guys that I'm more interested in over A.J. Green, but just crazy target share when Rondale Moore was in the game. I think that's only going to go up He's clearly a weapon in this offense. And with Kyler Murray playing the way that he did on the road against the Titans, I think there's a big year in store for Kyler Murray. And therefore, I want as many wide receivers as possible from that offense. And obviously, people got to be really happy about DeAndre Hopkins' week 1 performance with 2 scores as well. The other rookie that I need to talk about is Teresh Marshall. 6 targets in week 1. He did not have a great week production-wise. I understand that. And so people are kind of saying, oh, well, 6 targets, he didn't make the most of them, so is he really a factor in that offense? Well, for me, it's all about the targets because Robbie Anderson, the star wide receiver for Carolina, had a great year last year. He only had 3 targets. He had 1 reception for this team. And I think my biggest takeaways from the game, Christian McCaffrey is going to take away what Robbie Anderson did last year, where he was just a PPR stud, was always open in the quick pass game, but now those targets are going to Christian McCaffrey. So now Robbie Anderson is becoming a deep threat again like he was with the Jets, which is going to make his production very volatile. And it looks like Marshall might be targeted more. DJ Moore seems to clearly be the wide receiver 1 there as far as the targets go. But I think there's a role for Marshall in this offense, especially in the red zone, as he was targeted in the end zone twice in this game. The thing I need to mention with Terrace Marshall, they play New Orleans this weekend. I do not think he'll have a great game this weekend. So I think that you're kind of in the spot where you can buy him really low because after this Saints game, here's his schedule. The Texans, the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Vikings, the Giants, and the Falcons. This guy could go completely bonkers the 6 weeks after this New Orleans game, and then it'll be too late to try to buy low on him. I would heavily consider adding Terrace Marshall if you have an open spot, or, again, if you need help at the wide receiver position. Moving over to quarterback, let's talk about what happened with the Bears. They lost to the Rams this weekend. Andy Dalton did not look great, but Justin Fields came in and got some positive reps, looked pretty solid in the offense, and I'm just going to kind of put this prediction out there. That exchange is going to happen soon. Justin Fields is going to be the quarterback for the Bears probably in the next couple weeks, and so it's going to be very important that you add him relatively soon. I think his ceiling is very high. His running ability really makes him a very appealing quarterback option. As we've seen throughout the years, running quarterbacks just hold a ton of value in fantasy football. So I would consider adding him, especially if maybe you had an injury to your quarterback position like Ryan Fitzpatrick went down. If Justin Fields is available, definitely look to add him. I think he could be a huge riser late in the season. 2 other quarterbacks that I need to mention. Jameis Winston, 5 touchdowns on just 20 passes. Crazy efficiency. You won't get that every week, but the hope is maybe the Saints will be down a couple times this year and you can really benefit from Jameis airing it out. I was impressed with him. Jameis looked really solid to me and looked like a guy who's matured in a better offense, a more just kind of well-coached offense with Sean Payton. And therefore, I think Jameis could be a nice add and a guy that could end up being a pretty nice second quarterback on your roster in 1 quarterback leagues or a 3rd quarterback in 2 QB leagues. I think Jameis is a nice speculative add. And then the other one, Teddy Bridgewater. He's my streaming option of the week. He's got Jacksonville and the Jets coming up the next 2 weeks. I think he'll be just fine in those 2 matchups. Then you can drop him before he goes and plays Baltimore the next weekend. But for these next 2 weeks, hey, he could be pretty good and pretty solid for you as far as a fantasy option. Finally, the tight end position. I know this is one of those positions where I'm really struggling in quite a few of my leagues. If you didn't have, Darren Waller or Travis Kelce or George Kittle, you're probably sitting there going, okay, who can I add on the waiver wire that might actually help me allow me to move on from guys like Mike Gesicki or Blake Jarwin maybe, or whoever you added. I mean, Mark Andrews looked really shaky his first week as well. So who can you add to either give you depth or be kind of a nice waiver wire pickup for their matchups coming up this week? And my top option this week is Jared Cook. Jared Cook was 5 receptions for 56 yards. He had 8 targets as well. That's the big number. They take on the Dallas Cowboys this week. I think that Jared Cook is a really nice play, a really nice option, pretty safe floor to probably give you double-digit points. And therefore, I think Jared Cook could be one of those guys that holds value throughout the year. Like I said, the Chargers look like they're going to throw the ball a lot. And against the Cowboys, they're going to have to score some points. So Jared Cook is a nice addition going forward and just for this week in general. Gerald Everett, the wide receiver for the Seahawks. I know a lot of people are talking about him and excited about him. My only caution is the fact that Will Dissly also played a role in that game. Of the 5 catches, Dissly had 3 of them. Everett had 2. Everett just happened to score the touchdown. So I'm kind of iffy on which one I want to add, but it did look like Everett just is going to be that third option. His athleticism, his role in the red zone, I just prefer that a little bit when you're talking about the tight end position, which is so volatile. You need touchdowns in order for it to really pan out for you. The other 2 guys kind of on the same, they're on the same team, and it's just a matter of preference here. Adam Troutman had 6 targets, but unfortunately, he did not score the 2 touchdowns. Juwan Johnson did. But Troutman's coming off of injury. And so I do think Troutman will take over this role and be the guy at the tight end position for the Saints. It's kind of a speculative thing on my part, but Juwan Johnson did show some flashes. So if you want to take the chance with him and the touchdowns, go for it. But I'm going to go with Troutman in that situation where Jameis Winston threw the ball 20 times. For Troutman to have 6 of those targets, that's very high value. And so if you don't hit on getting Jared Cook, I think Troutman is a nice guy to go ahead and try to add to your roster. And the final name for this week is Cole Kmet, the Bears tight end. He had 5 receptions for 42 yards on 7 targets. That was from Andy Dalton. And while I think Andy Dalton does help Kmet a little bit as far as the targets go, I think once Justin Fields takes over the quarterback position, Kmet might actually be able to kind of take advantage of the touchdown aspect of the game as well. And so Kmet is a guy who I'm interested in. 7 targets. Jimmy Graham wasn't really a factor, wasn't really on the field. And therefore, I think this is Kmet's. This is all going to Cole Kmet. And I think he's going to be the guy to own for the Bears, the tight end to own, and the guy who going forward could have a big impact in fantasy football. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you're able to find some hidden gems on the waiver wire. A lot of times these guys can make or break seasons. These guys can win you leagues. But also, I'm going to caution you, do not go crazy with spending fab this week. You'll regret it. You're going to want to maintain a budget so that you can add guys later in the season. But if there is a guy that's really, really appealing, if it's an Elijah Mitchell or a Mike Williams or maybe even a Tim Patrick, then go ahead and spend some money because they're going to give you wide receiver 3 floor or RB2 floor as long as they're the starting guy there. So definitely pay attention to the waiver wire and definitely take advantage of it. But this has been Run the League on 365 Sports. I'll be back next week to talk to you about waiver wire pickups. And also, don't miss Start and Sit later on this week as I get you ready for week 2 of the season.